Well, hello everybody, my name is Roger and welcome to my channel, Rogers Reads. So today I'm doing a book review, and this is a book that I actually won in a Goodreads drawing, and it's called Roan, the Tales of Conor Archer. The reason that I signed up for this book was that I love me a good Celtic story, and given that this one takes place in my home state of Wisconsin, how could I resist? So on to the story. So the story follows 17-year-old Conor Archer, who's a musician in a Celtic band in downtown Chicago. It's also worth mentioning that his mother is dying, and she's in the final stages of cancer. So, on the evening of his mother's death, though Conor doesn't know that yet, a strange biker named Rory shows up at the pub where Conor's playing, pulls him out of the pub, and bites his hand. As it turned out, Rory had rather sharp teeth. And then he tells Conor that he's going to go through some major changes. So, on the way home, Conor encounters a beautiful woman by a fountain who bandages up his wounded hand and then, right before his eyes, turns into an old hag and warns Conor that he only has a short time to live unless he acts quickly. So Conor's pretty shook up. He returns home that night, and his mother, right before she dies, tells him that he has to return back to Tinker's Grove, Wisconsin, which is an Irish immigrant town along the banks of the Wisconsin River, where he is to stay with his Aunt Emily. It was a hometown that Conor had never heard of and that his mother had never spoken of until tonight. So he's kind of sick from the infection of his hand, but he takes the bus to Tinker's Grove, and by the time he arrives, he's pretty delirious, from the bite, and as well as the heartbreak from his mother's passing. So when he gets off the bus, there's a crowd of people standing around, and he tells the people that his name is Conor Archer, right before he begins to drift in and out of consciousness. So one of the people in the group around him, decides to take him to a Native American burial mound to be healed. The evening then holds in store some very bizarre events as Conor's friends watch in awe as Conor is mysteriously healed. Now, it's this point that Conor realizes that Tinker's Grove is a very mysterious place, with the web-figured and toed children of the town called the Dark Ones, who seem to have animal-like powers. Then there's the talk of the dangerous and ancient river demon named Piasa, or is called the Devourer of Souls. And there's a strange being who, as according to myth, came from Celtic lands centuries ago and supposedly inhabits the Indian burial mound. So the days get even stranger from there as Conor begins to physically transform, to change into something that's not altogether human. And people seem to see Conor as sort of a savior whom can save them from the imminent battle between good and evil, as an ancient evil is about to rise and destroy everything in its path. So as we learn as the story moves forward, it's up to Conor Archer to bring the balance back, to push down that evil, as it were, but he can only do so if he embraces his true nature. So, on to what I liked about the story. I love the folklore and mythology aspect of it, in which the author incorporates figures from myths such as the Morrigan, along with an entirely new mythology, creating a unique and fresh story. I love how the story weaved in aspects of Irish culture and Native American myths, and even some of the old Celtic gods and goddesses. The author did a fantastic job of painting a vivid and lifelike picture of the mythical town of Tinker's Grove, along with its strange inhabitants and the mysteries surrounding the town. Because this is a town where everyone has secrets, and Conor has to work hard to discover them. Yes, there is an evil about to be unleashed, and I love the way the author slowly built it up in the realistic characters and the vivid description of place. I also enjoyed how the story slowly unraveled to reveal more and more about the colorful characters and their motivations, those characters that both human and not. and how every secondary character was essential to the story's final climax. But not only were they essential, they were incredibly interesting as well. It was also fun how Conor discovers that his ancestry and life are not at all what he thought, and in fact, he is part of a much larger destiny in which the future of Tinker's Grove, hell, the future of the world, depends on his decisions. Speaking of Conor, he was completely relatable in all of his confusion, doubts, fumbling, struggles, and insecurities. So in this way, it was easy for us to empathize with him and all that he was going through as he began changing into the being that he was always meant to be. And as a reader, I felt that I was vicariously living through him. I loved seeing Conor's immense character growth as the novel progressed, as he moved from a frightened teen to the story's hero who had to face the ultimate evil, the ultimate villain head on. It was also especially fun that the author didn't tell us right off the bat what it was that Conor was turning into, which really added to the story's intrigue and kept me turning the pages. In fact, it wasn't until the last part of the book that we learned what Conor was transforming into and why. Now, the villains, and yes, there are several, were delightfully wicked. One particularly evil creature was something right out of our childhood nightmares. You know, so often the villains in the novel ended up being cliched and caricatures, but not so in this book. I felt that the villains were complicated, complex, and had reasons for everything that they ended up doing. Likewise, the heroes were equally complicated and multi-layered. You know, I found the many different types of meticulously thought-out creatures in this story also to be especially mesmerizing. I love their descriptions and especially liked learning about their abilities, their pasts, and their motivations. So, speaking of that, I thought that the world building in this book was phenomenal. I thought that the author did a fantastic job of blending and then reshaping elements of mythology, ancient culture, modern culture, science, and realistic magic to create something genuinely original and believable. So, on to what I didn't like about the book. You know, there really wasn't too much that I didn't like about the novel. I will say the novel is incredibly long, just shy of 600 pages actually, which probably could have used some additional editing, or maybe not so much editing as cutting. Though I did appreciate the attention to detail, there were parts of the novel that could have been snipped out, and as it did drag in a couple of places. But all that being said, because of the length of the novel, the author was really able to flesh out all the characters and engage in some remarkably complex world building. There were also a lot of characters in the novel, and a time or two when the narrative was jumping back and forth, I did find myself getting a tad confused. I also did find the dialogue to be overly formal and maybe a little bit stilted in several places. But on to my final verdict. In my opinion, this was a captivating classic story of good and evil, good versus evil that I absolutely loved. This epic story had it all. It had heroes, demons, gods, goddesses, druids, fantasy, mystery, and plenty of action that kept my interest right until the final page turn. It was a beautiful and emotional, sometimes haunting story, at times dark, but ultimately hopeful, powerful, and inspirational. It was also a creative and beautifully written story with rich, detailed prose and evocative descriptions bordering on the poetic that really sucked me right into the story. It was breathtaking, exciting, with numerous plot twists and turns and revelations with a perfect blend of Celtic legend, Native American lore, and modern-day Wisconsin. So, Roan, The Tales of Conor Archer, this was a journey that I'm so glad that I took, and I ended up giving this book 5 stars. And there's going to be, or there is, no, I don't think it's out yet, there's going to be a sequel to this story, and I will definitely be reading it, because this is actually titled Volume 1, so we know that there's more coming. So that is it for my review of Roan, The Tales of Conor Archer. If you like this video, I'd really appreciate it if you give it a thumbs up. And as always, I thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all of your support. And I will talk to you in the next video. Bye-bye.